Everyone, and welcome to the regular virtual meeting for September 15th, 2020. I'd like to call this meeting to order and ask that everybody mute your cell phones or other electronic devices. And please mute your microphone when you're not speaking to improve the sound quality of the meeting. Right, Kristen? Okay.
Yes.
We'll go ahead with the Pledge of Allegiance, and John Swerk, can you lead us this evening?
Sure.
Thank you.
Pledge allegiance.
Hold on, we gotta wait for the flag.
Okay.
There we go.
Pledge allegiance to
To the flag
the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic
and to the republic
for which it stands,
for which it stands,
one nation,
one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, John. All right, Rob, you want to go ahead and check quorum, please?
Okay. Strangely, we are looking at the month of October. It doesn't seem like it, but here we are. So the meetings for October are the 6th, the 13th, and the 20th. Do those meetings all look okay? Or are there any conflicts that you may have?
Rob, what's the thought on virtual versus in person?
At this point, all virtual.
Okay.
So, Rob, we're going to be, which one of these is the stormwater financing session?
October 13th, we'll have a bond ordinance where we'll notice it as a special meeting or a meeting where we can actually vote, and then we will step down or revert to a study session, and that'll be the stormwater financing.
Right, it'll be a big night on October 13th.
Yeah, the 13th is full.
I hope everybody can attend that one for sure. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Let me know if there's any conflicts that pop up, and we'll make sure and make note of it.
Yeah, okay. Item number 4, public comment. This is the time of the evening where anyone who wishes to check in with us can do so and speak to us on any item that is not on the agenda. Kristen, is there anybody out there in the waiting room, or do you have any email comments that are non-agenda related?
We do have one caller in the audience. This is caller with a phone number ending in 1982. I'm going to ask you to unmute at this time. So if you'd like to unmute your phone and speak to an item that's not on the agenda, you may do so at this time. It looks like the phone is still being muted. So I've clicked ask to unmute, caller 1982. I'm assuming there's no comments since mute has remained on. I do have a comment via email. It is related to an agenda item, so it will be read at that time.
Gotcha. Okay, well, hearing no public comment, we'll move forward. We move on to reports, trustees. We'll start with Penny. Do you have any report for this evening? No? John?
No reports, thanks.
Bob?
I'll report, Chris.
Rob?
Just a quick thanks to the Kripe family. The 9 and the 11 actually looked like a 9 and an 11. So very way to go, and appreciate all the effort your family put into that. It really it means something to the community. So that's great. Thank you.
It was terrific.
Yeah, it was great. It was really good. Andy, do you have any report this evening?
No report.
And is Jack one of those 2 phones I see on the screen?
He is. He is the phone number ending in 1199.
Okay, or the person purporting to be Jack. Jack, do you have any report this evening?
Jack, I've asked you to unmute as well. Perhaps try pressing *6. Sometimes that works to unmute.
Don't crash.
Yes. Jack, it looks like you're unmuted now.
I've known Jack for a long time. He's on his way to his house, and he has no report. So that's me.
Thank you.
Your Honor.
Village Attorney, do you have any report this evening?
No report tonight, thank you.
Village Manager?
No report, thank you.
Okay. And Village President, I do have a brief report. I'm going to resume our stormwater updates because stuff is happening, and I think it's important that if people want to hear what's going on, that they have the ability to do so. If you guys remember back in August, we authorized Strand Associates to begin work on bidding and construction documents for the wetland in the Cook County Forest Preserve. They're currently working on a lot of the back of the house calculations for water quality. They're also working on a program for wet weather sampling so that they can begin to collect samples to respond to the Forest Preserve's requirements on that. They're working on securing geotechnical sub-consultant agreements for the soils work, and they'll be starting borings within the next 2 weeks. And they're also preparing to pull together the permit request access for the Forest Preserve of Cook County. Berger Construction, who is our consultant on the cost estimating, has been working along. They had a site visit last week, came up with some interesting ideas that they were discussing with Strand relative to logistic issues which could impact cost. And that we're expected to hear back from them when, Rob? When's their due date?
Their due date is just before the end of this month.
Awesome. So we'll be able to see some numbers, and certainly those will be available by the time we get together on October 13th. I believe there was also some survey crews out on the site, if I'm not mistaken. I can't quite remember who that was relating to.
I think it was the Strand work.
Ah,
I think it
okay.
was part of Strand.
So the good news is we actually have boots on the ground in the Forest Preserve property doing work right now as well. So more to come, and I think things will start moving quickly on that. And that's all I have for this evening. Oh, that's right. I'm running the meeting. Oops. You know, one night I just like to sit back and watch. All right, approval of the agenda. Does any trustee wish to remove an item on the consent agenda for separate vote? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the final form of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote?
Trustee Swerk,
Yes.
Trustee Kripe,
Yes.
Trustee Dearborn,
Yes.
Trustee Apatoff,
Yes.
Trustee Lampier,
yes,
Trustee Caladarchi.
Yes.
Okay, that motion carries. Consent agenda. I will ask the village clerk to read the items on the consent agenda.
Thank you. Approval of the village council minutes for August 18, 2020, the regular virtual meeting minutes, September 1, 2020, regular virtual meeting minutes. Approval of the warrant list dated August 28 through September 10, 2020, in the amount of $1,367,499.31. Resolution number R59, 2020, monitor defibrillator purchase from Zoll Corporation for adoption, and resolution number R62, 2020, the 2020 cleanup week change order for adoption.
Great. Okay, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda by omnibus vote?
So moved.
second,
Roll call vote?
Trustee Dearborn,
Yes.
Trustee Lampier,
yes,
Trustee Apatoff,
Yes.
Trustee Swerk,
Yes.
Trustee Kripe,
Yes.
Trustee Caladarchi.
Yes.
That motion carries. Thank you. Item 8, ordinances and resolutions. 8A, resolution number R60, 2020, Saints Faith, Hope, and Charity School temporary tent approval. This is up for adoption. This is another request to use temporary tents for extra classroom space during the COVID-19 pandemic. The process for installing the tents has been previously approved by council. Here to review is Community Development Director David Schoen. David?
Yes, just briefly, we have another school that would like to use a tent for an extended period of time. And they have already installed the tent with the village manager's authority. And now tonight, the village council would give them authority to have the tent for a total of 180 days over the next 12 months. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for David? I'm not
None
seeing any. Okay. Is there any public comment, or is the applicant wish to address the council?
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect. This is Donna Borman. I'm the business manager at Saints Faith Open Charity. I'm the one ending 1982.
Okay.
My apologies, I wasn't able to get through. Yes, our tent is just temporary. It will be coming down October 30th. I do know that the other parish, Divine Mercy in Winnetka, was told by the village to contact me because they're looking to put up tents for the entire year. So ours is coming down October 30th. Hopefully we'll be able to get the permit extended here this evening.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming this evening. We appreciate it. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak on this item? Hearing none, I'll bring it back. Are there any comments or questions or anything else left with council? Seeing a bunch of no's. All right, may I have a motion to adopt resolution number R60 2020?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Trustee Apatow,
Yes.
trustee Kripe,
Yes.
trustee Swerk,
Yes.
trustee Dearborn,
Yes.
trustee Lampier,
Yes.
trustee Caladarchi.
Yes.
That motion carries. Thank you. All right, item B, resolution number R61 2020, Phase 3 Streetscape Engineering Services. This is up for adoption. In order to proceed with the Phase 3 of streetscape improvements in the spring of 2021, the engineering design services must begin now. Here to review the proposal for engineering design services are Public Works Director Steve Saunders, and he's being backed up by Jody Mariano from Tesca and Joe Vondra from the Ciorba Group. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Steve.
Thank you and good evening. As President Rintz mentioned, we have brought before you this evening a proposal to do the design engineering for the third phase of the streetscape program. And I've got a brief presentation. Kristen, if you can share that, that I can walk through the engineering proposal. So the first, next slide. So in 2019 and 2020, the first two phases consisted of Spruce Street and Chestnut Street, the post office north parking lot, and then the second phase was 2 blocks of Elm Street, outlined there in blue and red respectively. Next slide. The third phase proposed in 2021 is Lincoln Avenue north of Elm Street up to the entrance of the parking lot that goes in back of the community house. That'll include a little bit of work in the Elm and Lincoln intersection to clean up some water main valving that was put in sort of a circuitous way back in the 40s. There's an opportunity to clean that up for a potential larger water main going east on Elm Street in the future. And then the 2 northeast and northwest corners of that intersection. Next slide, please. So the engineering scope of services was provided by the Ciorba Group for the engineering, and then Tesca Associates for the streetscape elements and the landscaping. It would be a single contract. There are two scopes of work. Ciorba's scope starts on page 66 of your packet. Tesca's starts on page 75 of your packet. In general, the scope consists of data collection and detailed topographic survey. There's been some preliminary survey that was done for the streetscape master plan back in 2010. So Ciorba Group would be building on the survey that they did at that point, updating it to current conditions. Then developing plans, specifications, and estimates, including geometrics, water main design sheets, drainage plans, striping and signage, a set of lighting plans, and then all of the streetscape element plans, bidding documents, and cost estimates. The scope has one review set at 60%, which would allow for village review and comment and any potential tweaks to the design at that point before proceeding to final documents. The scope also includes bidding assistance in terms of answering any interrogatories during the business bidding period if there are anything unclear with the plans or any addenda are needed to be issued. As President Rintz mentioned at the beginning, we're sort of at an urgent point for the schedule. If you can move to the next slide, please. The project schedule for design, assuming that we have a notice to proceed this week, would take us through really February for the bidding period of next spring. And if we want to have a construction window in the spring of next year, we're really kind of running out of daylight to start the detailed design phase here in the next couple of weeks. That would bring 60% review documents back in late October, and then we could finish that up and have the bids hit the street at a favorable time right after the first of the year. And then we would order the long lead time items and could start construction, assuming good bids and plenty of coordination with the business community. We could start construction in the spring window. Next slide, please. The proposed project fee is $68,588 and 78 cents. I'm sure we could negotiate the 78 cents out and make it nice and round. That includes design services for Ciorba and also for Tesca Associates. And the budget contains $70,000 for design services in the downtown revitalization fund this year. Next slide, please. So the recommendation is to consider adopting Resolution R61-2020, which would award a contract to Ciorba Group and Tesca in that specified amount for design, engineering, and landscape services for the streetscape improvements on Lincoln Avenue. Next slide. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions for Steve?
Yeah, there is a discrepancy between the paper that we have, agenda packet page 69 is a different amount. That's $65,588. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. The print is small. I misread it. I need glasses. Never mind. Never mind. Okay, that was an eye test. I failed. My apologies.
Steve, I have a question, and I guess Chris too. We had talked about doing a little walkathon in phase 1 and 2 to learn what maybe the pluses and minuses of the first couple of phases here.
Yep.
And how that might benefit us for phase 3. Where does that stand relative to where we are right now on this proposal?
Sure. Well, as you know, I mean, I've been extremely frustrated because I've been wanting to have this walk around since April.
Right.
COVID is making that nigh impossible, and I've really been struggling with how we actually do that, understanding that, you know, everybody's comfort level with gathering is different. And, you know, I have to be respectful of that. And so, you know, we've continued to push it off and push it off. And I'm hoping that, you know, we'll be able to at least address the issues and do the sort of stuff that we need to do prior to the 60% point that Steve indicates is a somewhat of a check back time. As you saw in your packet, you know, I had Jody work up a complete and comprehensive report on phase 1 and phase 2, kind of outlining, trying to address some of the issues that I heard from a couple of trustees who were concerned about certain items, trying to address them directly and help you understand some of the technical aspects behind those decisions, along with you know, an overall report and a history lesson as well. As you all know, that I was hoping that Jody would be able to make that presentation along with Steve and Jim, and then we could walk around, look at some of the areas, you know, discuss the things that people may have questions on, and then we could at that time deliberate and maybe direct staff to make any tweaks, as I guess as we've referred to. But we just haven't had that chance, Bob, you know, and
Right.
As much as I'd love to do it, I just can't see how I can pull it off when we've got when there's such a wide diversity of comfort levels relative to gathering in general.
Well, I agree with that, and you know, we can all walk separately or together, a couple of us or whatever, in pairs. But I do think that you know, we may all have our own opinions and views on phases 1 and 2. And personally, you know, in general, I think it looks pretty good. But there's some parts of it that I have a concern with, particularly as it goes into phase 3. And you know, I think that if we are approving this, you know, I think some of those concerns, if other people have concerns, should be surfaced so that Jody can respond to it or take it into account or whatever. But what I wouldn't want is just to approve this and have it just the plans come out without taking into account how people feel about, you know, where we're going on this.
Right, and I understand that, Bob, but I think, you know, actually, I guess we'll save the deliberation till afterwards. I'd rather just with questions. I will respond to that, though, because you make a point that I think needs to be responded to. Right now, I'm looking for technical questions of Steve, Jody, or Steve. Rob.
Great. I'll table my other comments that were similar to Bob's about kind of I've had continue to get feedback from many residents, and I kind of agree with the general thought, especially but looking at some of the new things that are designed for this next phase. I think it does warrant a walk around, and we think, you know, we have to say which of us are comfortable with this, and we'll get to that when we get to that. As far as technical questions go, I have a question about what do we pay for design and project fees to these two groups in the first couple of phases?
I don't have those numbers right at the top of my head, but
it's okay.
It was in the $40,000 to $60,000 range total for the two phases, maybe a little more than that.
If you don't have that, that's okay. I was just curious because what was covered in those other fees in phase 1 and phase 2, because I'm sure they went through light selection and type of material they're going to use. And so I was just curious what's different or why would it be more for the next phases. because most of the stuff's been picked out, I would think, and most of the big questions have been answered. This is now kind of what else we're going to do or not do to that property, or to that area.
Yeah, so it's similar scope of work. This is the longest stretch of the 3 that we've done. And similar to phase 1 and phase 2, we just have very preliminary work. So none of the detailed drainage plans, the water main plans, the lighting plans, none of those details have been developed. The fixtures are picked. So we have like the details of what the foundation looks like, but in terms of the lighting calculations and the wire sizing and all of that, none of those real details have been designed. So we're paying basically for the same kind of work to develop the details for this specific project.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
Other questions? Not seeing any.
And there will be, I'm looking at on, let's see, page 75. There will be a public open house of some sort to review the Lincoln Street component of the streetscape design. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that similar to phase 1 and phase 2, while the preliminary plan had been worked through with the business community, all of the details, there was a separate open house to work through construction phasing and exact location of how we're going to deal with doorways, and we still have designs to finalize on the planters and the exact location of the trees and all of that. Once we get those worked out, we'll have more detailed discussions with the business community and the public at large.
Okay.
Hey, Chris.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. One follow-up question. We're gonna have time to discuss elements of this plan, like for instance, the white. Is this considered a technical question? If I want to question the widening of the sidewalks and the narrowing of Lincoln, or is
Sure.
that something? I've spent a fair amount of time walking the streets, so to speak, but of really trying to understand that area. And I spent a lot of time at businesses between Aroma, what used to be Aroma, and Stacked and Folded, and McLaughlin's, others. And I have come and seen many near misses with the current width of the street, and people backing up. When they back up, most people came back up in their own lane. They go across the street, and it's two-way traffic. So I guess I'm concerned from a technical standpoint. I have real concerns about, and I've seen it just from living here and also just actually watching the traffic patterns, real concerns about widening the sidewalks to narrow the street. Because I have real also concerns that while I want to support the businesses, I want to support our residents and the safety of backing up when people walking on, just all that freneticness over there. I think it's potentially a real issue by narrowing that street any more than it currently is.
Sure. I'll let Jody speak to that. Jody?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me join your meeting. And I saw Steve was also nodding his head. So Steve, if you wanted to jump in, I'll just get started. We worked with Public Works and Forestry early in some of our early investigations of the phase 3 area. And the desire to widen the sidewalk and narrow the street is really just to make it more pedestrian friendly, especially now with all of the businesses trying to get as much outdoor seating and dining as they can. And when we talk about widening the sidewalk, we're really only talking a matter of 6 inches, 12 inches. We're not talking about a really dramatic amount, but I will default to Steve here as far as the appropriate widths of the roadway. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I was just going to indicate that as part of the engineering services, we have a full suite of auto turn evaluations that will be done to make sure that the striping and the geometrics are such that we meet all the lane width standards and the maneuvers getting in and out of parking spaces will be accounted for so that they can be done safely. And those will set the amount that we're able to actually widen the sidewalk. So the overall vision is providing slightly more space on the sidewalks for potential outdoor seating or things like that. But traffic safety will drive that as well. And that's the same process that we went through when we narrowed the roadway on Chestnut north of Elm. We ran all of those auto turn simulations and were able to pick up some reasonable sidewalk space on both sides of the street without really affecting safety in any way.
But Chestnut north of where you're talking about, that's parallel parking on one side and diagonal on the other, right? It's a little different layout.
It's a different layout, but it's the same kind of concept in terms of running the appropriate turning templates, using design vehicles that are suitable for Winnetka traffic, and making sure there's no overlap or conflicting movements.
And it's a one-way street too, though, Steve. That's another important.
Right. That's right.
But it's also a narrower right-of-way and a narrower pavement already. So, I mean, all of those things are factored into the auto turn once they pick up the topographic information, so they have exactly what the curb lines are right now. And then we can see how much space we can safely reclaim for pedestrian space.
Is there any thought of dealing with Lincoln Avenue north, south of Elm Street?
Future phases. That's to some extent dependent on
what happens with
the One Winnetka saga.
I think that's a great point, because for us to put a dime into that area before we know what's going to happen there, we'll just slowly either be ripping it up. I mean, I'm worried about the rest of it, depending on what they're going to do to that area, and do we want to make it somewhat something that meshes, that looks right together versus having two completely different looks. I know we're not going to wait 3 years, but I do think it's something for us to consider what's going to happen there and how dramatic that might be.
Right.
And who might pay for it.
Exactly. Even better.
Right. I would note the previous developer was provided the streetscape plan and design to our standards, not to what they just wanted to do. So having this plan in place sets the structure or the framework for it's going to inform what's going to go there.
Steve, yeah, I have a question for Steve. I think it's a technical question, and maybe for Jody. What is the game plan for the trees on Lincoln? How many of those trees would be removed? They're probably 10 on each side, something like that.
Unmute, Jody.
Yeah, I'm just about to.
Nope.
Okay, so we walked the trees with the forestry department and looked at each one individually. We identified some trees that we really think need to be protected, and also some trees that are in good condition that are likely to survive the streetscape work. And so in numbers, I can tell you we have 2 trees that we think can be transplanted to another location because they're small enough. We have 19 trees that we think can survive the streetscape and utility construction. We've got 2 trees that are existing ashes that will need to be removed anyways because susceptibility to the ash borer. And we have 10 trees that need to be removed anyways because they're in poor conditions. And we have 13 trees that would need to be removed due to the impacts of construction. So there's 46 total, and we are able to transplant 2 and hang on to 19. So we're trying hard to keep the nice trees here. We've got a couple, I will say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pretty large trees up at the northeast section of the Lincoln Avenue area. We've got 28-inch honey locust, 25-inch honey locust. We've got hackberries. We've got a nice big coffee tree. So those trees are intended to remain, and the lighting plan would then need to work around those trees that we're hoping to protect.
So the trees, as you walk north
Mm-hmm.
from the intersection, that are, I mean, there's obviously some big ones on the corner, I get that, but as you move further north, they're not that large. Are those going to be removed because of the expansion of the sidewalks, or what?
So and we should definitely, I'm happy to walk this with anybody, by the way. It's always easier out on site.
Yeah, for sure.
If you were standing at the intersection of Lincoln and Elm and you were moving your way north, on the east side of Lincoln, close to that intersection, is a small transplant ginkgo and a 6-inch maple tree that can stay. Beyond that, if you continue to the north on the east side, we've got a range of coffee tree and honey locust that range in size from 7-inch to 19-inch that most likely would not survive construction. As you get to that alley, almost on the other side of the street from the parking lot, we've got 5 big trees that can stay. Even with the potential widening of the sidewalk, narrowing of the road, we've looked at it closely with Public Works. We believe that those trees can survive the construction. And so those are the trees that I mentioned earlier, range in size from 7-inch hackberry up to a 28-inch honey locust tree. And so we want to hang on to those trees and protect them. On the west side, sure, on the west side of the street, so working your way down from the public parking lot, we've got a handful of 4 trees that are elms that range in size from 4-inch to 6-inch, and those we think can survive construction. So we would plan to protect those trees. Further to the south, there's a handful of silver maples, elms, there's an ash, honey locust. Those would need to be removed because they would likely not survive. And in some cases, they're poor condition trees that need to come out anyways.
And why don't they survive the construction? Because of the widening of the sidewalks?
It's not so much that, but all of the lighting work that's happening to support the streetscape requires underground utilities. So running all that trenching for the underground conduit does a lot of impact to underground roots and curb work and all of that stuff. When you think about a curb only being a 6-inch curb head and a 12-inch gutter pan, for instance, you got 18 inches to deal with, but there's an excavation beyond that. So we've got a couple of feet that the landscape just has to get scooped out in order to do all of that construction.
So it's not because those trees, the root balls, et cetera, the root systems as they exist today are too large. It's that the construction and the lighting and the infrastructure will kill them.
Yeah, they'll be cutting into the roots. So the trees that are out on the streetscape today, they're root bound in a way. They're in very small tree pits, and so they don't have space to grow. So they're really within that 4x4 or 5x5 area. They're hanging on to every bit of nutrients they can get out of the soil, but when we take that away from them and dig under them, we undermine all of that. So that's, there's nothing worse than going through a project where we're trying to save trees, but doing so much work that ends up hurting them in the end.
Yeah.
And they're not very big. They're not very big, are they?
They're not very big. And I'll mention too, just like we did in the west side of town, our intent is to continue to install new trees with structural soil. So that provides additional root growth area for them.
Okay.
I might add on the tree issue, 2 things we looked at some of this stuff early on in the preliminary stages, and originally the original project, before we even had a chance to weigh in on it, or actually the project that came from Tesca way back when, had those large trees on the north being removed and replaced. And, we sat down as a group quite a while ago and decided that we would actually curtail the improvements to ensure that we could save those larger trees up on the north end, because they are substantial and certainly, you know, I think there's enough beauty, personally, I think there's enough beauty in that stretch alone to merit not continuing a lot of the other improvements that far north. And secondarily, I talked with Steve and Jody about engaging the Environmental and Forestry Commission and having them walk around with the village forester and do an additional review tree by tree to make sure that any tree that was scheduled to come out was legitimately coming out, and that it had the blessing not only of the forester and the designer, but also of our forestry commission. So of course COVID has screwed that up too, and you know, I talked to Rob a couple weeks ago about trying to get that done. You know, it's hard to get people together to do this sort of thing. So I don't know what to say about that, but ultimately I would hope that the EFC could lend some additional comments on trees. And if we can save one or two additional ones, we should do it.
And the EFC has asked, they do want to be included in the tree decisions like you're talking about, Chris. I know that was a major topic of conversation at their meetings, is to make sure that, and I think staff is.
Yeah, I've talked to Chuck and Liz and explained to them that they're an advisory group, and while that we would appreciate their input and their feedback, but at the end of the day, the decisions come back to us to be made.
And we'll be noticing shortly a special meeting of that group for next Thursday.
Oh, great.
Unfortunately, we're not able to accommodate a walk around, both because of COVID and also sunset time. But we'll be providing materials far enough in advance that the commissioners can walk the section before that meeting, and then we'll have a detailed discussion of the trees.
Yeah.
Linking up.
I am happy for a walk around with masks. A masked walk around would be, and I don't know about everybody will chime in whether they're comfortable or not. I did have one question on the lights because that's been something that's been brought to me a lot. Currently, we use a runway design where you're having lights opposite each other, all parallel all the way down the street. People that have, and I've looked at Lake Forest and other communities where it's more of a staggered. It's more looks like like a village versus more of a city street where you have a light here and then a light on the other side next to the light. So it's a staggered approach. So you still have the charm of the village, but you're also using less lights and potentially less disruption to the trees. And I guess they say beauty's in the eye of the beholder, but that's something I've heard from no fewer than 24 residents when they looked at the original lights. And that may be less stress on the street. It may be less expense to the village. It may be a different way to, I just want to, as we look at that and do a walk around, that's something that we wanted to consider, but it may be easier on the trees too.
Cody or our engineer, could you, both of you, speak to the lighting design criteria that we're using?
Absolutely. I'll start, and then maybe Joe can kind of chime in here. Yes, I'm familiar with the staggered lighting pattern that we see in some other communities. When we started on this streetscape, we were starting based on a light pole fixture design that had already been determined. And that was back during the 2008 plan days before our involvement, but it was to model the lighting that was used on Moffett Mall. So given that light fixture and that light pole and the height, et cetera, we need to make sure that we meet certain criteria and certain standards. And I'll let Joe speak to this too, but if we were to go with a staggered light, we didn't think that we knew that we wouldn't have the same sort of light spread that we require on the streets and on the sidewalks using that light product. So I'm going to turn it over to Joe to kind of speak to the more technical sides of the lighting.
Well, thanks, Jody. I think you did a pretty good job explaining that. The light pattern that we used for streetscape phases 1 and 2 is ideal for the size of fixture we have. It's kind of all a matter of geometry. For the pole height given, there's only so far the light extends across the street. And with the they're relatively short. They're around, I think, 14 feet tall. So, getting 2 to 3 mounting heights out of the pole is kind of, what you normally see out of lights. So if we're trying to maintain that same style, you would probably end up with a similar configuration when you consider the IES requirements and recommendations as far as light distribution. So.
I think we need to take a hard look at that, because that's one of the main areas of concern. And if we're also worried about, if you walk down.
We'll save, Rob, we'll save the debate for when we get to deliberation, okay?
Oh, I'm with you. I just was, one point on the, and that's very fair. I said, as we're looking to unclutter the sidewalks, if you take a walk down the business district on East Elm, there are a lot of lights, and it's.
I understand, Rob. We'll save that for the council discussion.
Okay, Beal.
Any other questions for Jody or Steve?
Just if I can, just to circle back to the question that Trustee Apatow asked about the previous expenses for phase 1, which was the little bit of spruce and chestnut. That was engineering expense of $79,430. And then phase 2, which was that kind of short little block and a half section of Elm Street, that was $31,570. So we're still in the same kind of range based on project size and the amount of work that has to be done.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate it.
I don't know whether this is a question for now or for the deliberation, but I had a question about the planters, and certainly something I would talk about if we did a walk around. I know it was, we approved it, but those were in the drawings, and I personally am not crazy about them relative to how they look in situ. And I was just wondering if there might be a possibility of looking at other options on the in the phase 3 portion that would be, similar but not exactly the same. And also how they're placed on the sidewalk, like outside of Harris Bank and so forth. I can't remember exactly where they are, but that would be something I'd be interested in talking about. Again, we don't have to talk about it tonight, but just, sort of a heads up in terms of as we move forward, questions that I have.
Jody, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, so the Harris Bank, tell me, is that the section on Elm Street, correct?
Yeah, it's near,
Gotcha.
yeah, and it's just, they're so wide that.
The south side of the street.
Yeah, and it just narrows down. So I was curious in terms of how we got to place, again, we don't have to talk about it tonight.
Sure.
But just up for conversation, because I do like having the planters, having planters along the street. I think that's really great. But just in terms of, how we maximize our sidewalk width and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, the real intent of those planters is to provide some edge, some separation between the sidewalk and the street at the corners where we have the bump outs.
Totally understand.
Yeah, and so you're right. At the section of Elm Street, it's such a small section. There weren't a whole lot of improvements. We didn't have any bump outs in that area at all, but there was still a desire to add some additional beautification, seeing that Elm Street is, sort of a gateway into the town,
Absolutely.
right in the center there. So, and the great news about the planters is that they are not anchored to anything. So
Exactly.
it's pretty simple to move them around. I will say that in terms of Lincoln Avenue, our intent would be, again, just to put them at the bump outs only. I mean, we want to keep the sidewalks as uncluttered as possible throughout.
Right. So, yeah. So again, if that just as we, I don't know if it's before the 60% or whatever, but if we can, maybe talk about that a little bit, but. Again,
yeah, I mean, the only other thing worth mentioning is that, going back to the downtown master plan before the streetscape was underway, there was a really strong sense from the task force and the community to do a really good job as best we can to unify the east and the west sides. And so as much as we can make streetscape unified with a similar approach to placing objects, a similar scheme in all of the materials and products that we use, we really want these two halves to be as similar as possible.
Right. And again, maybe, we redistribute or whatever, but
sure.
Yeah, okay, great,
Yeah,
thank you.
no, appreciate that.
Anybody else? Great. At this point, we'll move to public comment. And Kristen, I think you've got an email.
Yes.
And Scott's here to share his opinions too, so.
Would you like me to read the email?
Go ahead. Why don't you read your email?
Okay, this email is from Terry Dason, the Executive Director at the Winnetka Northfield Chamber of Commerce. Dear Village Council and President Rintz, I am aware that the Council will be discussing the resolution number R61-2020, Phase 3 Streetscape Engineering Services adoption at this evening's meeting. I am asking the Council to pass this resolution and move forward with the much needed updates on Lincoln Avenue. I have lived in Winnetka for almost 32 years, and I am certain that nothing has been done to our downtown business district infrastructure except for repairs until the summer of 2019, when Chestnut Street was overhauled and updated with a new water main, outdoor lighting, more spacious sidewalks, road work, and a variety of seating areas. As painful as our businesses felt during the updates, I believe the village did an excellent job completing the work as timely as possible. Liz DeChant was instrumental in staying in touch with our local businesses by installing signage to help navigate information about the businesses that were open during the construction. I am sure many of you have seen longer and more disruptive projects within surrounding communities. Fortunately, our village made the decision to continue with the planned work for Elm Street. The village was able to move quickly during the pandemic and did not have to feel responsible for the disruption of businesses while the Elm Street corridor was completed in the spring of 2020. There has been an uptick of people within the West Elm Business District once the construction was completed. Our residents like being in our downtown. There is a destination for them to go during their walks within the village. We should move forward with the construction in the East Elm Business District and not wait until the pandemic is over. I hope all of you have heard from your friends and neighbors about how beautiful and welcoming the Elm Street Business District looks with all of the updates. I hear comments continuously complimenting the village for the much needed improvements that were made. I am also confident you have noticed the influx of residents walking and biking to our Central Business District this summer. We have all needed a place to go for the past 7 months during the pandemic. Our downtown has become the destination during a walk. I am sure you are well aware of the fact that our neighbor to our south, Wilmette, has begun their road construction on their main downtown business district. The village of Wilmette took this opportunity to have a conversation with their local businesses in their main downtown business district about updates to their infrastructure. They asked their businesses if they wanted the construction work to begin now or wait until next year. Glenn Kiefer, owner of Sophia, the new steakhouse in Wilmette, told me that all of the businesses unanimously agreed that now was the right time to do the work. They chose to have all of their pain and suffering happen at once so that when they come out of the pandemic, they will be able to move forward without the obstacle of construction right after a pandemic. I believe that is what the Village of Winnetka should also do to help our East Elm businesses. The Lincoln Avenue corridor has just lost 2 corner anchor restaurants. Now is the time to update the Lincoln Avenue Business District. The timing of having the 2 empty storefronts along no movement on the one Winnetka property has given us the opportunity to move forward with the updated to our infrastructure and appearance of our downtown by investing in the future of our community. There will not be disruption to any business on the 4 corners of Elm and Lincoln, and the business along Elm and Lincoln are already disrupted because of the pandemic. Therefore, business is down for all brick and mortar. Waiting until after the pandemic to do the road work would be the kiss of death to these businesses. Let's follow our neighbors in Wilmette and Glencoe and do the work in the spring and have this complete for the summertime business. It is important that we do everything possible to support the current businesses. Updating our landscape in the business district when our neighbors are doing so in Glencoe and in Wilmette is the right thing to do to keep our village a viable option as we come out of the pandemic and entrepreneurs begin shopping for their next opportunity and location to open their business.
Thanks, Kristen. I will mention that when Terry saw this was on the agenda, she called me because she was really concerned. It's her birthday today, so she had other things going on this evening with her family. And I suggested that she share her thoughts with us, and certainly I think she did a good job of that. So additionally, I know, was there anybody else there, Kristen?
There were no other email comments, and there's no additional members of the audience.
Great. Well, Scott, that leaves you.
Except for me. You know, I had nothing going on tonight, and I just wanted to see all your smiling faces again. It's just been too long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't rub it in.
Obviously, having a little bit of a historic connection to this topic, I thought I'd dial in and see the direction. It is, I'm sorry I missed Steve's presentation, but you try and time these agendas and call in at the right moment. A couple interesting things. One is, I think I got involved in this first in 2016. So it's very interesting. Some of the topics that have been brought up tonight are the same topics that we talked about 4 years ago. You know, the width of the sidewalks, will the streets be safe? How many trees will we lose? You know, how do we balance consistency of look versus perhaps wanting to make a change? So, I think we all come to this question of what to do with our downtown with many of the same questions and perspectives. I have to say, and Terry said it in his note, I've been very pleased with the response or the use, I would say, on the west side. I was down there just today, and, we've all seen it as we've been down there or driving past, how many people are making use of the benches and the seating areas. And that's without even any activity programming, right? One of the things, and John will remember this, right? During the design phase and also during the master plan, one of the things we talked about was creating these bump outs so that they could be a place where events could be programmed, right? We thought about everything from, geez, do you reach out to New Trier High School and have students put on, little short plays? Do you have music there? And even without that, it's been fascinating. Now it is, it's the summer, it's nice. People, can't go a lot of places, but I think that's been good. I think I would say I'm very glad that we got rid of, and I know Bob and Penny were kind of advocates for this. We got rid of the lights crisscrossing the intersection of Chestnut and Elm, because I, like many people, when I first saw the lights, I thought, wow, that is really bright. And I did find it interesting. I read through the document, so that the lights obviously dim pretty significantly. It looks like, 20%, maybe 30%, they dim with age. So that will certainly help soften things. As the trees get bigger, that will help soften things. So yeah, I think I was originally kind of concerned, but I was glad to see that. One thing I will say is I do recall we did spend a fair amount of time saying we wanted to have a consistency of look with Moffett Mall. The idea was once we work on the south part of Chestnut and we can then link Moffett Mall into all of Elm Street, you get a consistent look and feel. And I think that also bears out in moving to East Elm, right? The overall master plan, if you remember, is we want to try and narrow that intersection at Green Bay Road to provide more of a link between East and West Elm. And so having a physical narrowing of that artery is one thing, but then also having that consistent look makes it easier as people begin to think of that as one downtown area. So I think, that's, I think, a factor to keep in mind is to have a physically different look does then factor into how people view the two downtown areas. So something to keep in mind. And Rob, you mentioned this, the width of the street. One of the things that we talked about in the master plan is when you think of both the post office area and the One Winnetka, and we should probably stop referring to it as One Winnetka, that space where we got to build something, what that's going to do is no matter what gets built there, it inevitably is going to have more residents, right? Residential housing will be part of a solution. So you're going to have more residents downtown. You're going to have more activities bringing people downtown. You're going to have more people walking in the downtown. And, as we did our walk around during the master plan, one of the things you hear about and you notice is the sidewalks are very narrow. When you put outdoor seating there, that makes it even tougher for somebody with a stroller, small kids, somebody with a bike to get around. So the feeling was we want to have this be a walking downtown. Let's provide the space to make it walking. We did spend time talking about when you restrict the side of the road, people backing out. Obviously when we had the design done, we followed the safety standards that are, the transportation department sets out. And I think that people are more cautious when there is less space, right? They react to their environment. So, I mean, I'm just glad to see that we're considering, moving forward with the next phase. I think Terry said it well in terms of the timing of it. I also do like the fact that in this next plan, there's another opportunity for residents to voice their opinions, right? I think that that's something that we always want to be doing. I think, we've got a pretty good design. Can it be tweaked? Can the planters be moved around or changed? Yeah, I think you want to, the way we thought about it when we did the plan was trying to ensure that consistency of look to try and build this view of one downtown as opposed to, two separate east-west downtown. So, that was the way we were thinking about it.
Thanks, Scott. I think that it's always nice to have a historical perspective. I mean, as I was kind of came in on the tail end of the first stage of streetscape and, really appreciated the work that Gene did and going through the process of doing first the downtown master plan and then putting together the task force and, drilling down on a lot of those important details. So, and I appreciate you coming tonight. Trust me, the day they kick me out of here will be the last time you see my face on the screen.
There's no football game on tonight.
I promise.
But no, it is really great. And Scott, I thank you so much because, keeping in mind what the vision was is really important. And of course, once the project is implemented, how things actually look on the ground sometimes, there's stuff that needs to be tweaked but it's important that we keep in mind what the vision was as we go forward. So I think we can and will. And yeah, I know that you're always watching and I'm
not always.
Is great. What? Well, no, but I mean, it's great. Again, in the community perspective as well as the committee's perspective is really important. So, we're just 6-7 people and we want to reflect the community. So we're trying. Right.
So, all right. Thanks, Scott. Can you stick around for the discussion?
Sure.
Well, thanks. Just in case we need Professor Meyer to weigh in on anything else here. All right, we'll open it up for conversation. I'd like to make some opening comments. Rob, contrary to your experience, I'm in downtown in a highly visible way 5 out of 7 days. I run. I always go right up Lincoln, wave to all the store owners, stop and chat with people who used to be eating at Cafe Aroma, then cross over, go down Elm, up Chestnut, and I get stopped all the time by people. And to be honest, outside of the initial brightness of the bollards, which I thank Jim Bernal for taking a lot of ingenuity in figuring out a good way to dim those things down so that they were no longer a hazard to drivers. That's one thing that I heard that people really were a little concerned about, and I think that's been addressed. And the other thing was that we don't have enough bike racks, which, Penny, if you remember the conversation before was,
Yep.
That was raised as a potential issue once people started coming. And
Right.
I hear it from a lot of people. Anybody who goes downtown on a Saturday or Sunday will see bikes everywhere. It is
Right.
amazing.
I mean, the
It's
great part is,
absolutely amazing.
the great part is there are bikes everywhere. Isn't that a great problem to have? Yeah.
It is, and certainly more bike racks seem to be called for in future phases because people are really doing. I think Terry hit it on the head. People like to come downtown now. We finally created a place that people want to be, and lo and behold, they're there. What a surprise! I mean, I do this for a living, and it's no surprise to me that when you create an environment that is pleasant and modern and clean and accommodating, that people are going to come there, and they're going to spend time there. You'll certainly hear merchants saying, "Oh, somebody sitting on the bench in front of my optical store reading a book won't buy glasses from me." I don't think is the point. I mean, the point is that we're creating a space where everybody in this community can come and enjoy it. You go down there in the evening. Now that I have a dog again, I get to walk in the evenings. And the cool thing is to see that now Chestnut is anchored on one end by 2 really active restaurants, and on the other end by 1 and soon to be 2 new restaurants up on the north end of Chestnut. And people walk. And when you see the well-lit streets and people walking up and down, all of a sudden the concerns about brightness begin to fade a little bit. Yes, I'll agree that until our trees grow out a little bit more and we get the 25 to 30% light degradation that the engineers and the designers tell us happen with LEDs over a relatively short period of time, it's going to look a little bright. But if anybody can remember what that downtown looked like 24 months ago and compare it to where we are today, I think our designers and our planners and our citizens committees have pretty much knocked this one out of the park. We did make tweaks in the first and second phase. We added 40 new shopper spaces to the parking experience, and I've heard from plenty of businesses who are really thankful for the fact that we redistributed parking and made it easier for their customers to access their stores. I just mentioned, think of this. If you remember, we had this big spazzed out discussion about bump outs before, and we actually, remember Andy? We ended up saving one because it was just there by virtue of where it was, out in front of Doyle Opticians there.
Yeah.
And on 3 occasions in the past week, I've seen a person sitting there, different people, reading.
Yeah, people do sit there.
Just
they do.
Just sitting there, enjoying the downtown, being with people and reading a book. I mean, we've never seen activity like that in this downtown. I understand the commitments, but the one thing we have to remember is from my perspective, as a professional who's done this for a living for 25 years, at some point I have to trust my design professionals and know that they know best. Yes, we provide them with the overall direction and the language, but then they take it from there and fill in the blanks and make it something that's supposed to meet with our expectations. I think when we start getting into subjective discussions on various components, because you know, we individually, there's a lot of things I personally don't care for on an individual basis, but I do like what's happening in the downtown and how it's working and how it's come together. You know, I had Tesca spend a lot of time. I hope you read and understand that the reason why, Rob, why the lights are so bright is because the national standards have changed since 1970 when we last lit this downtown. And I worry about the issues surrounding if we decide to start dimming things down too much, that we run afoul of safety standards, and we end up opening ourselves up for litigation by simply ignoring the standards that are currently being used in good design in 2020. Phase 3, as I mentioned, I reviewed it with staff. We talked a lot. We've already pulled the bump outs out of phase 3. We've gutted the whole north end of it to save trees, and hopefully the EFC will be able to weigh in and help us understand better whether we're really doing the right thing on the tree removal front or not. And the one comment that I got almost immediately after we had finished the base infrastructure on phase 1 was how much nicer the sidewalks were on Chestnut. And Steve, I don't remember how much we widened them there on the, David, do you remember?
I can tell you.
9 inches, 12 inches?
It was 12 inches widened sidewalk on the east side and 6 inches on the west, I believe.
Yep.
I think you got it flip-flopped. Or am I wrong?
My recollection was 12 inches on the east and 6 inches on the west. We had 18 inches to play with.
Yeah, but whatever, people noticed it, and it makes a big difference in how you navigate the downtown. You know, and we were all concerned about, oh my God, you know, I remember the conversations about parking and the nightmare of parking. And the one thing I will say is that we have calmed traffic on Chestnut now to the point where people are careful, they have to look around, and traffic moves through there really slowly, as it should. You know, nobody should be hustling down Chestnut, and really nobody should be hustling down Lincoln. I mean, these are streets where the traffic should slow to a crawl, and drivers should be aware of what's going on around them, and people should be moving at a very slow rate of speed because pedestrians are crossing back and forth all the time. Wilmette and Glencoe. Wilmette is going full speed ahead. They are doing a huge project downtown right now. And if anybody's been up to Glencoe in the last week, you'll notice that they redid that entire street right across from the Writers Theater. And they've turned what was really the ass end of the downtown into a viable retail space. And you wait and see, they're gonna start to get good shops on that simply because they set the environment up for doing something good there. It makes a big difference. And, you know, on that front too, I just met with some people last week who were interested in purchasing the Savocci glass place. And it's the same restaurateurs that run Sophia's in Wilmette. And the first thing they said to me is what a fantastic job that we were doing, and that they hadn't considered Winnetka when they first came and started to do their concept. But now that they see all the activity and the quality of what we're doing, they want to be part of it. And they're going to bring a really cool restaurant right to that north end as well. Most importantly is we need to start this engineering now if we're going to stay on track for an early 2021 implementation. It worked this year. We started as soon as the weather would let us, and we were out of everybody's hair by, what, Memorial Day, Steve?
June, sorry, it was into June, but that was just kind of finalizing.
Yep, but we were able to hit fast and hard early in the season, and I think we really minimized the impact on the businesses, and most of them appreciated it because we learned from the first phase. So, you know, if we let this engineering lag, we're gonna end up with a bad bidding season because we're gonna be pushing into the spring with bids. We're gonna end up with bad implementation because we're gonna be in the summer, and we heard from the store owners already that summertime is not the time to be doing this, contrary to what might be what we were all thinking at the time. But the key thing is that we are in a competition with the communities around us. It is, and it's not just who's got the prettiest downtown. We're competing for businesses. And I'm telling you that these small businesses look at the environments and make their judgments based on it. We've sent a really good message to the business community about where this community is going. And I really don't want to see it linger anymore as we argue about, personal agendas here and there. I think we got to get this thing moving, and we got to get it going now. And at that point, I'll leave it up to you guys to fight it out amongst yourself, because I don't get to vote anyway. So,
Chris, I share your sense of urgency on this, and for all the reasons you laid out. But my feeling about this whole thing is, it's sort of funny how it all played out with the pandemic, and there's been this massive transformation that's happened in terms of where people are thinking about living, and I'm an example of it. Before COVID started, we were actively looking at condos downtown and plotting our move out of Winnetka as soon as our last kid graduates, which is a long time from now, because we have so many of them. That's my issue. But the reality was that this is a great town for raising kids. It's quiet. We have great schools. But it's freaking dead. I mean, it was dead. It was not good. And it was, I have to tell you, it looked like hell. I mean, Elm Street looked bad. Chestnut looked bad. I mean, it looked like that 70s show. It was not even remotely appealing. And I don't have the nostalgia because I wasn't here in the 70s. So I can't, that doesn't have that kind of nice hazy gloss to it that it's like, it doesn't have any of that to me. I just look at it and I compare it to when I'm walking around in the West Loop, which is vibrant and, you can walk around and, it was, so we were actively thinking about that. And, since this whole thing has hit, it has made us really rethink our long-term plans. We've heard it from a lot of our friends. We've heard it from a lot of people our age. We've actually seen it in a lot of our friends that were diehard, I'm going to stay in the city and I'm never moving out, who have now put their houses on the market. The housing market here is hot because of that fundamental change. And then just fortuitously, we finally got our shit together and we got some work done on these streets that I've been hearing about for more than 10 years. I was on the caucus, like Jack, you were the chair of the caucus. I remember, we were starting off way back then and people were talking about it and and it was like, oh my God, what does it take to pave a freaking street in this town? It was just unbelievable. I'm like, oh my God, I get it. That's how you guys want to renovate your house and you have the endless patience to do it. But my God, it was just so, Chris, you came in, you had a sense of urgency about this. I was somewhat, I think one of the people that was more resistant to that, candidly. I pushed back on the bump outs. I was very much a proponent of pay as you go. And so, I was probably one of the people that was a little bit of the wind against what you were trying to get through, but now you see it, it's bright, you can walk it, you do see people getting together, in a safe way. COVID's not going, even with the vaccine, this pandemic is with us for the next year, this reality. If we suck up next summer, or if we don't capture the moment, I just really think we're gonna miss the lightning strike that's happening as people are selling their places in the city and they're looking at Wilmette, Winnetka, Glencoe. We have a rare opportunity. So then, with respect to the plan itself, I think continuity of design is critical. It just would be kind of silly to, I'm more on the east side here near East Elm. I think it would be kind of silly if it looked totally different than West Elm. So I think that's important. I think I've heard, and I'm interested in hearing if I missed anything. I think there's 3 issues that have been raised, and they're good issues. I'm not in any way being dismissive of the issues. It's just I've heard them discussed for 10 years. So, but the lighting, the width of the sidewalks versus the streets, and planter placement. Planter placement seems infinitely easy to fix. So I don't think that's going to affect anything here. The width of the sidewalks, I think, has been a blessing. You know, I have had multiple scary incidents in this town with entitled, obnoxious drivers who've almost run over one of my kids when things were flowing too damn fast. And what's even more amazing, I had a couple incidents where some of our residents actually then yelled at my kid. This actually happened 3 times. Once with my wife with a stroller, and then separately with 2 other kids, where then the driver had the audacity to yell, like, get out of the way, you know, like that kind of, but that's a polite version of what I heard. So the calming and the narrowing, and I'm sorry if it makes it harder for people to drive there, I am glad that happened. I think that is absolutely what we wanted to accomplish. It was successful. It feels so much safer. You know, anyone who has kids going from the east over to Skokie School or to Washburn appreciates the change. It was legitimately scary having your kid go through there before. I mean, people do the rolling stop and it's just nuts. So I think, you know, the width of the sidewalk and the streets, I think has been absolutely spot on. And I appreciate that it is an inconvenience. And I think that was intended and it was good. I think, you know, the lighting issue, yeah, I mean, yeah, it was certainly much brighter than what was there. I have to defer kind of to the experts on this one. I think it looks nice. I have heard not a single negative comment. To the contrary, I've had multiple people, including in the caucus interview I recently did, express consternation at the fact that this might be delayed in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I heard people that were genuinely upset when they thought that that might be the case. So that's the only input I've heard. You know, the bollards thing, I know that there were concerns raised about that. I guess they were a little bright, but now they look great to me. You know, the safety of lighting, I always put that first. You know, when we got pushback about reducing parking spaces to be ADA compliant, you know, we've got a lot of elderly residents. We've got people with limited mobility. Lighting is critical. The wider parking spots are critical. So for me, those are kind of like, those aren't stylistic issues. I think part of the challenge here, and this is just the reality that we deal with, is I think a lot of people just don't like LED lights, and I get that. I mean, they're not as warm as the older lights. They're just not. I mean, but I think what we've got look good. You know, if we're looking at a 20 to 30% light reduction, I think it would be like, it would be, I don't want to say irresponsible, but I think it's very difficult to contemplate how do you reduce the lighting now? Because, you know, if you start at a lower level and then we lose 20 to 30% and then those trees get bigger, I worry a lot about that. I'd be much more worried about that than if we shoot a little too bright. You know, I mean, it's, you know, that's just the reality of new construction as well. So, you know, I don't know if I missed anything, but I feel like it was mainly about width, lighting, planter placement. If it's stylistic stuff for me, like that's not, I mean, that ship has sailed, you know, I mean, it would look so silly to have a disjointed village. You know, I think maybe we learned something, the bollards, let's not do bollards. And I don't think there was a plan to do bollards anyway. So it's just those Sternberg poles. And Joe, I appreciate your kind of chiming in on a technical perspective. Can you alternate? And, you know, again, that's something I'd defer to the experts on. I never had a problem with it, to be honest with you. But if there was a concern, I would want to see those questions answered. I feel like they have been. But, you know, if I'm missing anything else, I'm happy to discuss those. But my big concern, and frankly, I was a little bit worried at hearing this discussion, is we're going to do that thing where, like, let's do some walk arounds, let's put it to this committee and that committee. Like, I just, even if we had done this back in May, I think, like, we got to, you know, we got to trust the process that's been there and the people that have put so much work into this and you know, get moving. But anyway, that's my feeling.
Thanks. John.
Yeah, I too, like Andy, was a part of the Downtown Redevelopment Committee. I appreciate all his comments, and I do agree with 9% of them. I appreciate all your comments, Chris, that you brought up tonight. Agree with a lot of Scott's comments he brought up during his comments. And I agree that, you know, we have to rely on our design professionals. We've been through 2 of these processes already. I trust Tesca. Jody, I think, really knows what we're looking for. We will have a chance to review their plans as they're in progress or anything that we feel is a major item. Similar to Andy, I guess I've had no negative comments on any of the downtown information or downtown redesign, including lighting. Again, once the lighting does tone down a little bit, that may help some people. I do understand why they're across from each other because of the way the light throws. If you do alternating lights, that same light pole has to reach across the other sidewalk. So it's probably a higher pole. And then you've got trees in between that'll be blocking lights. So it does kind of help to keep them across from each other and obviously miss trees. The narrow streets, I agree, is a help for slowing down traffic. Even though Lincoln is a two-way street, no matter what you do, when you back out of a parallel spot, you're going to be going into the opposite traffic. And it's just kind of a given. You're never going to be able to back in and not go across the middle lane of a two-way street on the double-sided two-way angle parking. I'm comfortable moving ahead with the contract before us tonight and keep this moving for spring construction. And I think we'll have a point or two to really look at the project as we move forward. And Tesca does their 60% layout also. I don't think there'll be anything too major by the time we get to that 60% line to hopefully change anything. Thanks.
Next. Bob. Think I care about this, Bob?
I'm actually a little confused on this conversation because, I don't think anybody is saying don't do phase 3. There's all this full-throated argument that we need to do phase 3. We need to do phase 3. But why would we not reassess, look at the pros and cons of phases 1 and 2 and learn from that? Can we do it a little differently? It's not saying phase East Elm would look different than West Elm. I'd like to walk the street with Jody. I mean, I'm asking Peter Friedman, why can't Jody meet people out there? I mean, I have public, so on and so forth, and just look at it. The issues, the main issue to me, quite honestly, is the narrowing of the street and the trees. I walk the street every friggin' day. Chris, you run the street. I live on the street. I don't have a personal agenda, just for the record. No personal agenda here. Okay. But I see some very big trees that are probably too big for where they are. But I also see a lot of mature trees. And then I go to West Elm, and quite honestly, I see a lot of twigs.
I agree.
I'll be 78 years old, Chris, when that tree has formed and is beautiful.
I couldn't agree with you more, Bob.
Okay, so walk down Lincoln, and you'll see trees that are not that big, and we're going to rip them out. We're keeping 19 of 46. I mean, why can't we learn? Why can't we maybe think outside the box a little bit here on how we might be able to preserve the look of that street? It's a beautiful street right now. I don't think anyone disagrees. I mean, we can change the bricks and the sidewalk and the pavement and redo. But what I'm hearing is because we have to put in the lights, we have to rip up the roots and kill these trees. So I'm all about getting going on phase 3. I'm voting for this tonight to get going on this. But all I'm asking is, can we learn and think about how this might be tweaked a little bit to keep the character of the street as it looks today? I think it's really a beautiful street, and I really don't want to see a bunch of little twiggy trees that have replaced the beautiful trees that are there. And so just walk the streets and look at it.
Yep.
So that's all I'm asking for. And
Bob, can you join the EFC conversation next week? I think it'd be really important for you to
I will join that conversation. Absolutely, I will. I definitely. But I think that, Jody laid out the issue on preserving the trees. And it sounds to me like the trees are being removed largely because of the infrastructure work. And Jody, correct me, I understand the ash trees. I get that. They've got to go. And I understand if a tree is too large to exist and that type of thing. But boy, I'd sure like to work around and keep some of these that are there that are, you know, kind of mature, but not too big. And just think about this a little bit. So I'm a yes on this moving forward on the project, because I'd like to get it done, but I don't see any reason why we can't, you know, learn from what we've done and, you know, maybe adjust and tweak a little bit to make this a little bit better.
If I may, I just want to make sure that I was clear when I was rattling off all those numbers before. Those numbers for the trees that we evaluated were for the entire east side, including the section of Elm and the south portion of Lincoln. So it's a much smaller number overall, just looking at the north. But you know what, I think I'm happy to walk with anybody, and I'm happy to hear that that Trustee Dearborn, you'll be with the EFC next Thursday. But even still, I'm happy to walk with anybody. I mean, I only live like 10 minutes away. So
Peter,
it's
Peter,
very
can we
easy.
do that? Peter Friedman, is there a way for us to gather, you know, in limited numbers by appointment with Jody or something like that?
Twos.
To accomplish that? Okay,
Twos.
but we don't need the public to be notified of that meeting?
As long as it's no more than 2.
Okay,
Trustees.
Jody, when are we going to meet, you and I? When are we going to meet?
2 trustees or 2 people?
2 trustees, no more than 2 members of the village board.
I'll jump in.
I think Rob Bahan, you should schedule, if you can, for those that are interested, to meet with Jody and whomever else, and walk it and talk about it.
She's sick of hearing from me.
All right, Chris, you don't
Never.
need to be there. I would like to do that. I don't know if anyone else cares, but I would like to do that.
I'd like to chime in too. I guess I'm a little confused because of the talk about we're not going to delay this program. We're not. Jesus, this is the first time we've talked. I gave the exact same feedback, and Andy, you're absolutely right. So 3 things that you mentioned. There's not a lot more than that to fight on.
I didn't mention the trees. And
Oh yeah, no.
I agree with you, Bob, on the trees.
I think we're all in violent agreement that we should do this and we should get going on it. So I think that's why I'm not sure whether I'm a little confused. I do think, as Bob said, we have a chance, as I do with any project, whether it's any type of work I've ever been, you learn from what you've done. And you the best laid plans and the best laid hopes are, I know there's a lot of work done, but until it's there and you see it, you don't really understand it. So I think we're there. I think the lights are great. I think the design of the lights are great. I'm just saying how they're placed and what they're done. We have 14 lights on the Elm Street Bridge. 14 lights. It's a lot of lights. So I just want to look at this. We keep the same look and feel. I agree with Scott. I understand and I appreciate the feed. We talked earlier about why that design was done. So I think we're in violent agreement that this should go forward. I think we're in violent agreement that it should go forward quickly. And I think we should learn on those, at least those 3 or 4 things that we can decide very quickly and give ourselves a week to turn it around. But I don't want to hold this up either, but I think we should absolutely be smart about how we go forward. And I'm with you. I'll walk the street this week. Let's get it going.
Can I just say on the trees, what I would suggest would be helpful to me. I don't need to walk with Jody. No offense, Jody. I'm sure you're nice to walk with. But I think would be helpful for me is, you know, I think everyone shares the concern about the trees. Maybe if we start getting a tree map going and spotting, like, you know, one that we can share. So then, because I can take a tree map and just walk, and, you know, if the directive is, you know, what is the most number of trees we can save? In other words, you know, is it a situation where the trees and the lights are mutually exclusive, or are there ways to accommodate the tree? You know, I think, you know, if the directive moving forward is like focusing on the trees, I'm all in favor of doing that. That was one of the things that, you know, we were concerned about with the last go around. And but if there's other utility work, that's one thing I wasn't clear about. as I think there was on West Elm, you know, we need to know, I guess it'd be helpful to know that too. I mean, if it's possible to save some of the more attractive trees, great, but I don't want to commit ourselves to 19, God knows what year infrastructure, you know, like I'd like to kind of understand, okay, this tree, here's the issue, this tree, here's the issue. It does sound like there's trees that we can save those, so I'm not clear as to which ones are not savable under any circumstances versus the ones that are. I guess that's what I'm babbling on about. It would be good to know that, and then, you know, I think that would be helpful.
That's what the EFC was scheduled to do, right, Jody? That I wanted a report on every single tree and explaining why we couldn't save it, so that we had a good, clear understanding. Just so we all understand, my thought is that by getting EFC involved, that we would have the comfort that some people who are passionate about this have looked at it and have either given their seal of approval or they've decided to debate certain trees that are out there. But secondarily, that they can also be ambassadors to the community when people start saying, why did you cut down all the trees? That now we have a group of 7, 8 people who can go out into the community and speak on behalf of the decisions that have been made. And, you know, people that are recognized as people that care about, you know, our canopy as well as our environment. So I thought that would be a really good way of approaching that. And so I think we're going to get that, right? I mean, a regular inventory, Jody, isn't that kind of what we were shooting for?
Yeah, if the President Rents, if you're comfortable with this, when we send the materials out to the EFC in advance of their meeting, we can CC the village board as well if you'd like that information.
Oh yeah, I think that'd be great.
That'll be coming out either late this week or early next.
Is the width of the road or sidewalk a factor in any of the trees?
Well, so we have to replace the length of the curb regardless of whether we move the sidewalk or not. And with some of the trees, just simply the excavation and replacement of the curb plus replacing all of the sidewalk around it, with some of those trees, that's going to be too much for those trees to take. And so that's part of the factor when Jody was mentioning that we think some of these trees can survive the construction process. That's the construction. Some of it is the longitudinal wiring that's required regardless of how many lights there are. We're running underground electric to feed the lights from one end to the other. And some of it is just the curb and the sidewalk and the difficulty it's going to be on the root systems, especially the larger trees.
Haven't heard from Penny or Jack yet.
I just want to say, first of all, I think that including the Environment and Forestry Commission on this is absolutely spot on. I mean, that's exactly what their job is, and that's good. And Chris, your instinct about this in terms of having their expertise, and then they can, you know, assert, avow, whatever to the community that we're moving in the right direction on whether the trees should be saved or whether it's okay to replace them. I think that's great. Secondly, I think, yeah, you know, we're moving ahead with the engineering. We're approving that. And I think the dialogue is going to continue, you know, throughout this. So none of these issues are going to be settled tonight. Third, I think we need more sidewalk. More sidewalk is better. And traffic calming is a good thing. People will take as much road as they have. You give them more road, they just back up faster and more carelessly sometimes. So which is of course contrary to what one might think, but I agree, calming is important. Third, the lighting. I think that, you know, looking at the light map that was given on this particular agenda packet, you know, it would be interesting to look at what would happen if you alternate them. You know, it's an interesting exercise to look at. It seems to me that, I don't know that much about light engineering, but it seems that, you know, maybe it could be a good thing. Anyway, worth at least talking about. This is a really goofy question. I just have become a lot more aware of light pollution. And I agree that you know, having a bright light during the time when people are up and out is good. I'm wondering if it's expensive or impossible to have two-phase lighting so that like after midnight, the lights can be a little dimmer. I used to not be able to see any lights over the horizon of Lake Michigan, and now the horizon is all lit up. And, just wondering, do we need to have high levels of light all night? So again, not a question we need to answer tonight, but that's kind of, I think as we are stewards of our environment as well as of our streetscape, those are the kinds of questions we need to be looking at long-term.
Steve, what do you think?
We do have some flexibility built into the controller, but right now the fixtures are on off. They're not equipped to be dimmable. So we could look at either changing some of the times or we can look at it. The controller is flexible, the fixtures are not.
Yeah. Again, it just occurred to me and just something I would like to talk about over the long term. So thank you.
Well, I'm kind of curious about this. Jody, aren't those kind of, I don't know what you call the bulbs up on top? Aren't they? Don't they have like cutoffs in them or something that prevent light pollution, or do these just shine off into the evening?
These are dark sky compliant fixtures, so they do have some cutoff so that the light pollution primarily doesn't go up. They're designed with that type of cutoff to be compliant.
So okay.
Andy, you're muted.
I was just going to say, Jody, it doesn't say you're muted, but we're not hearing you.
Right.
Nope.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
We weren't being rude.
Calls, my cord just seems to kind of give out. So sorry about that. No, I really didn't have anything substantive to say. I was going to refer to Joe Vondra because he was the lighting expert, and I didn't know enough about the specifics of the luminaire.
Oh, you got anything to say, Joe?
Yeah, I think you guys have covered it. It is, the luminaires are cut off. The nature of the shape of the luminaire does bounce a little bit and light up just because it's got that lens on the outside. But an overwhelming majority of the light does go down towards the road. And then I think there was a question about whether or not there is the ability to dim, and like Steve said, it is available. It's not in the fixtures that are out there, but that's something that's quickly evolving in the marketplace, and we'll be here to, probably every fixture here in the near future.
So can we retrofit, or do you think that's a possibility in the future?
We can always retrofit. It's whether it's more of a question of if it's economical to retrofit. So
I guess the other question is, if we retrofit, does that compromise the safety of our sidewalks and streets?
There you go.
I mean, it would be something that you'd want to look at. I think, before you jump into this, the notion of kind of having like a scheduled dimming, you'd probably want to consider that citywide and probably kind of protect the village by, adopting an ordinance or adopting a resolution just to kind of say, this is what we're going to do. And then there is some guidance out there by the IES that does, you can use to kind of formulate a plan that works for the village. So it's, I think, something that can be looked into over time and adopted if it makes sense.
Good. Yeah. Thank you.
Jack. Video away?
What's that? I'm sorry?
Previously was watching this tail go back and forth across your screen.
That's another citizen expressing herself. So the discussions about having to remove trees because they need to put trenching in and things like that, it reminds me of the saying, when you have a hammer in your hand, everything looks like a nail. And I'm not going to restate what the other guys have said already, but I think thinking outside of the box when it comes to things like lighting and solving the solution of where do we put the infrastructure. It's important to look and see, are there other ways to solve it? Because as I was sitting here, I'm going, well, okay, so if the infrastructure would normally be, I don't know, under the curb or wherever it would be placed, is it possible to place it in a somewhat different place that would preserve the trees and not require that we do that? It might not be standard. It might not be what the book says you should do in every circumstance, but it might be an acceptable solution to solve that. And I get worried sometimes that the problems that we face that have to do more with the art of something as opposed to the engineering of something, we often solve the problem by defaulting to how the engineer solves it. And that's not an insult to an engineer. It's just that sometimes there might be ways to say, yeah, I know what the standard says you do normally, but what about in a certain, like for instance, let's say that you there was a tree on a street that had to be saved. There was no digging its roots up. There was no chopping it down. That tree had to be saved. How would the engineering go in the streetscape thing? Would somebody say, okay, well, this means that we have to dig out into the street 2 feet or something like that? I can't believe that the only solution is to chop down the tree. Not if somebody said, no, the tree's not coming down. The tree has to stay there. Find a way around it. Somebody would probably be able to find a way around it. And again, I know we're saying, okay, we've been arguing about this for years, but it's always because the answer that you get when you oppose the engineering solution is, well, we've already done this. The engineers looked at it before it got to the council. The answer has been determined. Everything's finished. I'm sorry. Here's what you have. You have engineering solution 1 or engineering solution number 2. So that I'm not saying stop what we're doing, but I'm saying maybe there are solutions that are not standard that we need to look at. So for trees, I would love to find a way to preserve trees and if possible, push the engineering a little bit to say, how do we put in this infrastructure in a way that will save more trees if possible? And I don't mean saving bad trees that have to come down. I mean saving, because that is a pretty significant number when you hear on the east side, out of 46 trees, we're only going to save less than half. People will talk and not be happy with that. And I think that the remark that all the trees west of the train tracks look like twigs is right. They really do. And yeah, I'll be 78 when they start filling out and the canopy gets recovered and that kind of stuff. So I think that's an important part for us to consider. In terms of the lighting, I think the first thing is to go to Moffett Mall and replace all the orange light bulbs over there with light bulbs that match the new part in phases 1 and 2. That to me is essential because right now, if you go over to Moffett Mall, you have that horrible garish orange lighting, and you come around the corner and there's the nicer lighting and the new stuff. The other thing for the lighting that I know we argue about this and talk about this, and I've talked about it in the past. Again, I know there's the engineering answer or the official answer. We must have this many lights and this much light coverage. But at the intersections, I don't know that we need to have the giant light poles, the really tall ones, simply because the plans say we must have that in those intersections. With all the luminaire, all the coach lighting we have around there, we've got a lot of light in downtown, and I don't know that we need to have the really tall lights at the intersections. And again, I'd raise that point back whenever I last raised it. I want to raise it again and say there are other ways to solve these problems. However, I think I think going forward now at double speed to try to get this done as quickly as possible is essential. I don't think there should be any delay in doing it, but I would say there are probably other solutions to some of these engineering light and tree problems. So.
Boy, I don't think Jack, you've outdone me here. You've outdone me here. I completely agree you talked about thinking outside the box. I think with these contracts that we're going to approve tonight, there's an assumption here that we can think outside the box, Jody, with our design on this. And I don't think there's any disagreement with going forward. And there certainly shouldn't be any disagreement with making this the best plan that it can be. There is no personal agenda that I've heard about here. You know, I'm so happy Scott's on the call. Scott's been involved in this from day one, but I think Scott, coming from a consultant world, would agree that you learn from what you've done in the past. And I think we just want to learn. And so, you know, again, I would like to meet with Jody. I'd like to walk the street. I'd like to talk about what Jack just talked about and see if there are ways to think about how to make this the absolute best we can be. And then we're going to move to Hubbard Woods and we're going to make that even better. Why would any of us disagree with that? So that's, Jack, thank you. I totally agree with what you just said.
I'd just like to jump in real quick and say if anybody from the village wants Siorba to participate as well as that for that walkthrough, please let us know and let Jody know, and she'll get us out there.
Thank you. We really appreciate the opportunity. So that's great. In the time of the tours in the time of COVID. Thanks.
I think President Rentz is trying to talk, but you're muted.
There you go.
Best for all of you.
Well, I tried to say something and I was muted, so I know how it is.
No, the one thing I wanted Steve to speak to, because Jack, one thing that you mentioned that really struck home with me is I hate those high boys, those big tall lights that are, you know, but yet we ended up stuck with them at the intersection. 2 years ago, I challenged Jody and Steve and Joe on those lights. And Steve, what's the deal on the intersections? I'd get rid of those things in a heartbeat if I could.
Because of the spacing of where the lights have to be and the height that was selected, you can't throw enough light from the relatively short pedestrian fixtures to safely light the middle of those intersections. If you look at the illumination diagram that's in your packet when you get a chance, and you look at the illumination circles that show the intersection of Elm and Chestnut, which is at the left side of that diagram, you'll see that the only light in the middle of the intersection is provided from the large roadway poles. And that's a function of simply the height of the pedestrian poles. Unless we want to locate them right out at the edge of the curve where they're going to get hit and kind of be in the way, then you can't cast enough light out into the center of the intersection to provide safety for vehicles and pedestrians traveling through the intersection.
I bet if we went out and turned off the lights, those tall lights, and looked at it, there would probably be enough light. There might not be what a consultant would want or anything like that, but I bet there'll be enough light. We live in a village where every intersection in the residential area is where we have lights. We don't have lights in mid-block or any place else. So in terms of there being enough light, I think that there would be enough light. I think there would be more than enough light, and I think that we should try that. Go and turn off the high boys at the intersections and look and see how much light there is and see if it's acceptable. Because
Jack, that's the whole problem is, you know, we've got these standards that we have to deal with, and I get this. I don't like it either, but you know, if some kid gets run over on a bike there and his personal injury attorney father finds out that the village elected to run afoul of you know, the appropriate lighting standards, I mean, you know, we got a big time lawsuit on our hands, and that's some of the issue there. So we might all stand there and say, this looks fine, but you know, when you stand out there with a light meter, does it meet the standards that, and I don't even know what standards you guys are using right now. So
But with a car with headlights on coming into an intersection that's already on a well-lit street.
You're preaching to the choir.
No, I know that, but I'm saying there might be enough light as it is. It might not be at the top of the standard. It might not be the platinum amount of light, but it might be bronze. It might be enough to satisfy the standard, and then we get the look that we want without having the giant lights shining down. You know, it's like, what is that movie called? War of the Worlds. The things creeping around looking for people. But
I wanted to get rid of those from the very beginning. I mean, if you look at the photometrics, I understand what Steve is saying. I just don't like it. So.
I get it too. I mean, I say, right, the engineering and the photometrics say that you have to do this, but the question is, do you really have to do that, or is that just the assumed answer, rather than challenging it and looking at it and saying, wait a minute, maybe we can do it differently.
I think we push back. I agree.
Joe, what are the standards that you're using to design these days too in villages such as Winnetka?
The standards are the IES, it's called Recommended Practice 14-2008, or 2018. And basically, the standards are established based on the classifications of the roads. And, you know, depending, it's classification of the road as well as the pedestrian traffic that is expected to be there. So, and you know, we can definitely look at this. You know, I hear the call for less of the tall poles. You know, we do phase 3. We'll definitely look at it and see if, you know, where we fall on the at the intersections, and see if we can, you know, eliminate or at least reduce it down to, you know, the minimal amount and still provide coverage. But there is like an overall lighting level that we're shooting for, and there's also a kind of a uniformity of the light. So it's kind of the highest point versus the lowest point. And what that does is kind of give you a mathematical number of the quality of light, how easy it is to be able to see obstacles, to see pedestrians, see other cars. So,
but we can walk around and experience it ourselves and understand, rather than looking at standards in a book. And again, this is where I get into the art versus engineering aspect of it. If we are walking around downtown, we understand what we can see without a light meter in our hands. And to constantly prepare for the possibility of a lawsuit, I mean, what's the true risk? Is the chance of there being an accident like that? So I am a lawyer.
Please no.
No, but I am. No.
Come
but
on,
that's
Jack.
what,
I mean, think of what you're saying. Really?
What am I saying? No, I'm not finished with what I'm saying.
Oh.
The thing is that, but we're not. We've got the whole village. We've got the whole downtown lit up, like unbelievably bright, and we're not necessarily relying on the application of a common sense standard, legally effective. We might be applying the platinum standard. This is what we must do because this is the best possible practice. And I've heard that as an explanation as to why my ideas aren't good. No, the best possible thing we must do, which is in this book and on this page, says that this is what we have to do. Rather than saying, wait a minute, let's go look and see. Will this still pass? Will this still be acceptable? Will this provide us with enough light to protect the people who come up? I think you know that if you took out those the tall lights and we just left the other lights in, there would be enough light without having too much light. And I think that too much light is a problem.
I agree.
Look at Kenilworth, look at Wilmette. Look at Evanston in terms of the way they light their streets.
Look at Lake Forest.
I think we have to leave that up to the professionals. And when I'm looking at the photometric, if you take out those tall lights, the whole intersection's dark.
No, it isn't. I mean, let's go turn off the lights and go stand there and look.
And the photometrics right now are
I know. You're looking at the chart. You're not going out and standing there.
Yeah, they're less than 2 foot candles.
For the record, Jack, I'm looking at it right now. It is pretty dark. It's right outside my window.
Yes.
No, I'm talking. What, the intersection of Chestnut and Elm Street?
Okay,
Yeah, we should go on.
Yeah.
Guys, let's.
Your point is well taken, and there's certainly no resistance to looking at the lighting levels, but there's more that goes into it than just an aggregate amount of light that hits the intersection, and the standards take that into account. So we can look at the impact of reduced lighting levels or fewer fixtures or things like that, but there are going to be limits beyond which I, as your village engineer, would recommend that you don't go. You're free to do that, but there will be some limits as far as at least at the center of the main intersections that we can get down to, and we'll report back to you on that with some options.
Thanks.
Guys, one last, I'm sorry, Chris.
Go ahead.
Just to make sure I understood what Joe just said. He said these are you use the word recommended standards?
It is the title of the document is recommended practices.
Recommended practices. Okay, I'm going to defer the attorneys on that. But this is, I think, where Jack is getting to. Recommended would suggest to me that there is room on either side of recommended. And that's what I would hope would come out of this conversation, is that both Jody and Joe would think about this conversation and say, where can we be creative in making this next phase as good as it can be? That's all.
You know, something that's really different about Lincoln Avenue compared to what we've done so far at Chestnut is that in the Lincoln Avenue stretch, we really only have the one intersection at Elm Street that, you know, by those standards would have those taller 30-foot light poles, but we don't have another intersection to the north. So by that logic, we really would only be thinking about that intersection as having taller streetlights. But I think for sure, we will take all of this. This has all been really helpful for us to take into consideration next phase.
Good.
Good deal. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to remind all of us that part of our jobs are being risk managers or you know, being aware of risks and protecting our village. That's kind of part of the trust factor of being a trustee, that, you know, we have to consider all these risk factors. I would love to get rid of those high hats. I hate those lights. I've hated them since I first moved to this town, but I don't want to put us in a situation where we end up doing something just by rule of thumb and common sense that ends up getting us in trouble someday. And it's not because it's completely opposite of my personal preference, but I also view our job as making sure we're watching out for the taxpayers of this community by not ending up in needless litigation because we decided to tone down the lights too much. That was the only point I was trying to make.
No, I'm not suggesting that we do anything that would have obviously increase our risk to that point. But by the same argument, we should have streetlights, every half block, right? On every residential street to prevent anyone from getting mugged or having, I mean, there are standards. We all accept a certain amount of risk. And I'm not.
All right, Jack, I'm going to cut you off there because we're getting. We're
no, but I'm saying
now.
I know that, but I'm not suggesting that we make it so dangerous for people to walk around the downtown that they won't come here. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying we have to look at what are we required to do and what are the recommended standards. There seems to be a difference.
Right, I'm totally on board with you there. So. All right. Well, once again, Bob, I'm going to commit to you that even though you walk around with Jody, I definitely want to have these conversations. Nobody has been more frustrated than me. These were conversations that were supposed to happen back in April and May. We got backed up here. You know, now here we are in middle of September and we still can't get together. At some point we had to make the decision. And, you know, now it's on us. I would have preferred to have the walk around and be able to really take the time to beat these things to death in the way we normally like to. But, you know, these Zoom meetings, this is just really ineffective for the sort of work we're trying to do right now. So, and I think, you know, with respect to the lighting levels, all that stuff takes a whole different perspective when you're standing out there in the street corner. And one person saying that's too bright, one person saying that's fine, and another person saying it's too dark. I mean, it's really hard to have these conversations. All I can tell you all is I'm trying my best. I want to do this the right way, but we're stuck up against the clock, and we do not want to miss our opportunity to bid this project at the right time of the year, right, Steve?
Correct.
Okay.
So Chris, how will someone arrange some walkarounds with Jody?
Yeah, you guys, I mean, it's all up to you guys to do it between you and Steve or Rob or
Okay.
Trustee Dearborn, here's what I'm going to suggest. I would say those trustees that are interested, let me know. I'll find out how many of you are interested. Now email me so I have an accounting for it, please. And then we'll make sure that there isn't more than 2 of you. But I would also say I would also recommend that you're really the next really good opportunity is with the EFC with respect to the trees. Take advantage of both is what I'm trying to say. Please let me know, and then I will put together a schedule that accommodates Jody's availability as well.
Hey, along those lines, do we know what time the EFC is planning to meet on Thursday?
It's 7 o'clock, I believe.
And Kristen's going to send that to us or somebody?
Yeah, the packets of the boards and commissions are sent each week. There are links there, but with this particular one, we will send it separately to you.
Okay, great, thank you.
All right. Have we beat this horse enough?
Big time.
Okay.
Are you saying we're nagging?
Not everybody.
All right.
Hey.
I'm going to ask the question. May I have a motion to adopt Resolution R61, 2020?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote?
Trustee Swerk,
Yes.
Trustee Caladarchi,
Yes.
Trustee Kripe,
Yes.
Trustee Dearborn,
Yes.
Trustee Apatoff,
Yes.
Trustee Lanfair.
Yeah.
That motion carries. Okay, item 9, old business, there is none. Item 10, new business, there is none. Item 11, appointments, there are none this evening. Closed session, none tonight. And last but not least, adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Trustee Dearborn,
Yes.
Trustee Apatoff,
Yes.
Trustee Lanfair,
Yes.
Trustee Caladarchi,
Yes.
Trustee Kripe,
Yes.
Trustee Swerk.
Yes.
I don't even get to vote for adjournment. I don't like that, Rob.
Chris, we know you don't want to adjourn.
You can block it. You can veto.
No, I've had enough, trust me.